You're on, Mike.
Hey, good morning. Thank you, Doug. Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me, and you can see I didn't quite get my comb through my hair this morning. And I'm wondering what you guys are doing up so early. Anyway, thank you for having me. How much time do I have, Doug, by the way?
You can go as long as you want. If people wanted to stop off, they can stop off, but a couple hours.
Yeah, did you advertise that I would talk about burial urns today, or was that
we did put it in our newsletter, but if you want to change it up, you're welcome to.
Well, that actual demonstration is quite long. It's about an hour and some odd, but I could kind of fast forward through it, but yeah, and actually we'll get close to that. I think I'll just fast forward it through that. We'll get the idea down. And we can ask questions. By the way, if you have a question, interrupt me at any time, just by using your space bar and holding it down. I don't mind having those interruptions. But anyway, I'll give you a quick introduction. I'm going to share my screen here and just kind of show you where I live quickly. Hopefully this will show. Let's get Come on up there. There we go. This is summertime at my place. As you know, you can actually see the smoke in the air here. California now in the summer, we've got a lot of smoky skies. I am standing in front of my house, and that's my workshop down there below the house. I am in rural Northern California, and I built that barn out of cedar trees here on my property. And actually my property burned. I've got about 110 acres out here, and everything in the distance there that you see was on fire about 5 years ago, and it's recovered nicely, and most people who come out here would never notice that it was burned. But let's give you a quick tour here. These are valley oaks that you're looking at, really massive trees, 5-6 foot diameters. Those are some Zinfandel grapes. I grow Zinfandel grapes. That's my house. That's a Sears kit house. And this will show you what the house looked like when I started. My wife and I restored this old farmhouse. It was really it should have been torn down, but my wife and I were up for a project, and we basically brought the house back to life in its original form, all the way down to the wood and the tiles. That's what it looks like. There's a Claro walnut tree there, outdoor shower. That's my pizza oven, kitchen, outdoor kitchen. These are my pistachio orchards. I grow pistachios as well, lots of other things. And then I think I head over here to my shop, getting close. That's the house. That's from my shop. I should actually do a new video without smoke in the air. And now this is where I work. I work outdoors. Being here in Northern California, it's pretty mild. Weather usually doesn't chase me off the porch here. This is a 12-foot overhang on my barn. The reason I work outdoors is I've turned for about 35 years now, and I just can't work around dust. So I've moved everything outside, which is fine, like I said, and I don't really need, actually I get most of my outdoor work done in the wintertime. I rough out bowls here in the wintertime, and I'm out here, our coldest day was 35 degrees, so it didn't get really cold. This is my production machine here. Obviously, that's a Vic Mark. It's a prototype. It was made just for me. It's a 4.5 horsepower metric motor. Just a beast of a machine. And then I think there's you can see my vacuum lathe there. That's what I take the bottoms of all my bowls off. Coming into my shop here, you'll see a lot of wine kegs. Those I'm an amateur winemaker. And you'll see this is a tool or a little wood storage area here with a bunch of hollow forms there. Those will be burial urns. Those are just rough outs, and then Peppermill Blanks, all kinds of other wood bits. These are Platter Blanks, Quarter-Sawn Quarter-Sawn White Oak Platter Blanks. There's part of my business. I sell these to other wood turners, just like I sell roughed out bowls to other wood turners. That's where I'm talking to you from. That's my little work area here. That's my photo studio. And you'll see just a series of roughed out bowls everywhere you look, mainly walnut. These are some sculptures I'm doing. That's a burial urn right there made out of redwood. That was actually a double urn, so for two people. And just some wood storage here of my really nice stuff that I sell to collectors. Give you a little panoramic view. Get us dizzy. It's a Harvey lathe, excellent, nice little lathe. Another tool holder, my respirator, chainsaws, a jumble of chainsaws. I didn't really clean up here for this shot. And then, yeah, just a little panoramic view of my shop. Matter of fact, this barn actually came from Michigan. It was torn apart, and I bought it, and then I reassembled it here on my property. It looks like a yellow pine, I believe. This is my office, which never really gets used. I don't sit down much at work. These turnings are just pieces that people have given me over the years. Some really nice stuff. But I've got quite a collection of small artifacts here. And then I think that's pretty much the start of my burial urn demo. And that's my pretty wife there. Hi. I'm going to turn that off right there and open it up for questions if you have anything to talk about for my introduction there.
I have one question, Mike.
Yes,
where
Rudy.
are all the wood chips that you used to have in your old shop?
Yeah, well, I don't create wood chips here in the shop. They're all outdoors now. So I use my tractor to clean my stuff up and pile them up. And the wood chips get used for weed control and other things, compost pretty much. And then I just push them off the side of the hill from my shop here. So
just
you ever try
so everybody knows,
wine cast?
I heard the wine cast, so I'll answer that in a minute. But Ruby, what was that question?
Just so everybody knows why I asked, the last time I visited you, your shop was thigh deep in wood chips throughout. Yep,
it usually is. And then I don't make my own wine cast. That's a very tough job to do. So yeah, no, I don't. That's beyond my pedigree. Any other questions? Okay, well, let's, so I'm gonna, this is a kind of a retro here. Let's watch this video here. And this is from a video that I did, boy, it's gotta be 20 years old. And so I'm a much younger person here. Let's hear what I have to say. And this
Mike Mahoney. I'm a professional wood turner. I'd like to say thank you for viewing my DVD on how I go about making hollow forms. Hollow forms have been of great intrigue to me over the years, and it's one of the first projects that got me heavily involved into wood turning. And I actually have my first hollow form here still 22 years later. I recall being very smitten with this piece, even though it's pretty brutal compared to the items that I'm doing today. And it's actually even worse if you actually got to see the inside. I only had a gouge to accomplish this job, so I didn't do that bad, but good to have a piece like this to see how things have progressed over the years. Today, I want to show you all the tools that we have at our disposal and how they work, and the process from top to bottom. When we make a hollow form, we want to make really nice, consistent wall thicknesses, gradually getting a little heavier here at the bottom to give our piece a little bit of gravity when we put them down. That's going to take a little practice and perseverance on your part.
Well, that was obviously an introduction to doing hollow forms, but we will actually talk about burial urns as well, because hollow forms lend themselves to be good burial urns. I'm going to turn the volume down on that particular video, and then we're going to fast forward through this. And I'm showing a spindle roughing gouge here because I think that's pretty much, this is an end grain turning that I did to make the hollow form. To get an idea, this is then I switch over to a bowl gouge. And I'm going to create a tenon here for the hollow form. And I'm just marking out there, the most important part of the chucking device is that flat spot where the chuck will hold against. Not only is the diameter of the tenon important, but that flat surface where the chuck melds onto the wood. So yeah, that's what's all I'm pointing out here. And there's actually audio on this video, of course, and I've had that turned off so I can talk about it right now. And I'm just talking about the shape. What I'm showing here is, this is how I do all my bowls and hollow forms. I've got this relatively classic shape here, and then I make this, we'll call that a clefted surface here, and it comes out just like that. What that does for me is it provides a visual to the actual finished shape. So the base will actually come down into the tenon material here, up and then around. I do that with all my turnings because I like to visualize the base before it's done. So that's what I'm talking about there. So let's start that up again. I'm just going to form the shape. Now you can see that the tenon, the wood is snug up against the chuck. And I know this is remedial for so many people, but if you're not making your tenons properly, you're never going to enjoy wood turning. So that's what I'm doing there. Getting the final shape ready to hollow. I use a very classic, simple form. If you notice, the ultimate diameter of the piece is 1/3 of the vessel. The top third of the vessel is the ultimate diameter. Speed this up just a bit. Now I'm going to get ready to hollow. There I am talking about hollowing the interior. Not much to say here. Let me see what I'm going to basically telling you to drill a hole into the bottom to get your finished depth. That's what I'm saying here. And then the process, of course, here, it can never change. There's my drill hole here, of course. And then I scrape out 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I start working down. And then this is always the last part of the hollow form that I do.
What are the dimensions of this piece, Mike?
Yeah, thank you, Ruby. In order for it to be a burial urn, it has to have about 180 cubic inches, which is very difficult to measure in a spherical form, in a hollow form, of course. But I start out with a chunk of wood that's about 10 by 10 by 7, and that'll make a good burial urn that'll fit just about anybody. And of course, you know, I'm hollowing it fairly well, so I'm not leaving it real thick, but I'm not leaving it fragile either. But thanks for that question. But the burial urn, so the dimensions of the urn, regardless of what you make, so dog and cat urns, pet urns, and things like that, just know that you need a cubic inch per pound of whatever went in. So no human is bigger than 180 cubic inches. And and that's 180 pounds. You might say, you know, so-and-so weighs 300 pounds. Well, they're going to fit into 180 cubic inch hollow form because, you know, of course, everything burns away. You're left with the bones. So kind of morbid talk there. But thank you.
That gets brought up a lot. So that's good to know.
Yeah. So, you know, a cat urn is usually a 5-inch by 5-inch, you know, cubic vessel. And in a most, you know, maybe a little larger for big dogs and things like that. Yeah, just so here I'm talking about the tools that we have for hollowing. And a lot of folks use, and actually I might even use the audio here in a second just to show you what I'm thinking. So many choices to make. And I'm going to show you a close-up view of these tools. And a lot of people use nowadays these rigs where you don't even have to hold on to the tool. It kind of you just push the tool in. And I'm not a big fan of those unless you're doing really deep hollowing. So let's show you a close up of all these tools. And I'm not advocating any hollowing tool. As long as it does the job, it's going to be good. This is a captive ring tool. These are little difficult to control to do a good job, but they do cut the interiors cleanly. This is just a round nose scraper. I think that's probably the easiest and best way to hollow out anything, because it only goes where you put it. This is the hook tool. And I'm saying right there, this is the beauty of this particular hook tool is the shank of the tool is in line with the cutter. A lot of hollowing tools miss that point, and this one's real easy to control because of that. Many times, and I think I show you a hollowing tool here that is not aligned with the shank, and that's a pretty difficult tool to hold on to. Many folks would know the Ellsworth hollowing tool. That tool requires a lot of skill to hold on to as compared to this.
And you have to keep the tool rest behind that curve, correct? Otherwise it flips over.
Yep. Thank you for that comment there. You have to have the tool rest before the hook. So the tool rest will have to be from here back. You don't want it up in this range because it'll be very similar to an offset tool.
Is the bottom of that tool flat or is it round?
It's round. Yep. I would prefer that. And if it's flat, it's going to be a little bit harder to use, I think. Speed through this a little bit. That's a teardrop scraper there. That's a John Jordan tool. Very similar to the ones. That's a Kelton tool. There's your Ellsworth one, that offset area there. It's a little harder to control. If you ever notice when David uses this tool, he's got a really large diameter handle. That's what makes it easier to hold on to. I wouldn't advocate this tool per se, but it does. You can see David's work. It does excellent hollowing in the right hand. These are the new carbide tips. I think those are pretty good for hollowing, not too good for turning. Let's see what I have to say here.
Before we start the hollowing process, it's on the other side of the studio here. Let's go take a look.
Best part about this
is a captured hollowing system. It's very novel. Basically, the tool is held horizontally between these two bars, and it takes away all the force that you would normally get as if you were holding this tool manually. I would resort to this tool if I had something really deep to hollow or I had some wrist weakness. Now, there's other contraptions you could hook up to this tool, a laser beam to basically measure your wall thicknesses. It almost gets on the verge of cheating. However, there's really no substitute than doing this manually. You'll get a much nicer feel when you hold the tool by yourself. And if you have some patience, there's no reason why you can't gauge your wall thicknesses evenly if you take time to check. Let me show you the process that I do.
Okay, well, that is what it is. Hollowing is probably a fairly easy thing to do. And since you don't have to ride the bevel on these tools, you just plow into it, and you have to pay attention to where you are. If you go through the sides, we all know whose fault that was. Anyway, I'm going to hollow just like we've shown, and I'm going to really fast forward through this. You kind of see I work top to bottom. I'm going to work all the way down to the bottom, and this is end grain, so it's a little more difficult to hollow because you're going right at the grain. You can I'm just kind of showing you what things look like as I go.
Mike, are you normally using wet wood or dry wood when you make these?
You know, most of them are all wet, and I rough turn them. especially for the urns, because they're all going to get a lid that's going to fit. And you can't do a green turning with a lid that will fit nicely. My lids are all threaded together, so you don't want that opening to ever go oval. But having said that, I do store a lot of cubicle wood that will make urns for animals that I can actually make all in the same day, and they're solid without cracks or anything like that. So this is how you take off. This is a little tool that I use to take off the bottoms of hollow forms.
Question still on the wet turning. When you say you rough turn them, put them aside.
Yep.
Do you go back into the inside of it after you stride out?
Oh yeah. So the form would be rough turn. So I use redwood burl for my personal burial urns that I make in my business, and so I rough turn those. So they'll be about an inch thick, and then I'll dry them, and then I return the whole thing inside and out, or outside and in that sequence.
Thanks.
Yeah.
The tool for
mentioned earlier about your average size for the urn at 180 cubic inches at the 10 by 10 by 7 blank. What's your basics for a pet urn?
A cat urn will typically be about 5 by 5 cube. That's what I start with, and then the dogs will be more like 6 by 6.
Now, what wall thickness are you shooting for a burial urn?
Yeah, probably a 1/4 to 3/8, a 1/4 inch on the sides, maybe a 3/8 inch bottom. That's what I would shoot for. And I don't really measure. I've done so many of these. I don't measure, but I kind of can tell by just the acoustics of the hollowing as I work. And that's important. If you haven't done these, and you have to stop, look, and listen all the time. Especially when I teach these, almost everybody's going to go through the side when they start, but it's a practice in patience. And if you have patience and you're willing to take the time, you can do these right every time. But it's also a very crafty type of turning, and there's a lot of craft involved. When I say craft, it's not just the essence of cutting the wood. It's the ability to see the tool inside the vessel when it's invisible, because the tool is going to disappear while it's inside the wood. So you have to picture where the tip of the tool is while you work, and that's craft in general. That's kind of the way I think about it. So, and listening to why this is happening is important. So I don't have the radio blaring or anything like that. So, another question out there.
Your tool for finishing the bottom, what is that? A sanding disc on a solid rod?
It's a sanding disc on a rod. I think let's back up and look at that. Let's see here. So there's just a cone of wood here. There's a faceplate here, and then I've screwed on a piece of wood at a cone, kind of a cone shape. And then I have a sanding disc right here at the bottom that impinges there. I use this tool, and I think you can actually look. I can't even think of the name of this tool, but you can buy these at craft supplies, I'm pretty sure.
I believe it's a Kelton or Kelton brand or something.
Kel McNaughton took this design from me and made the tool. And I think Craft Supplies sells it. I'm not positive. But that's all that is. But I vacuum chuck these at home. At most of the course, you couldn't vacuum with a hole in there like that. And then I just quickly talk about the shape. When you make a hollow form, and we're not talking burial urns here, because burial urns, you don't want them to be fragile or fall over. But and actually, I think there's a little bit of me here talking about the shape. Like I said, a very classic form is what I appreciate. And let's turn up my volume here. Let's see if I. So this is kind of an early way of doing what I'm doing today, is talking to you while watching a video. And I do this in my office here.
As I'm watching the DVD here, I noticed I put a lot of emphasis on the interior and the consistent walls. And that's all well and good, but it's really not telling us the whole story. What we'd really like to do is hollow out a pretty form. And that's not easy to do. And I'm not an authority on design. I just know what works for me. As I show you here on the video, I'm basically making the base smaller than the opening. And this really works for me. I believe it gives the piece a lot more elegance when it finally does sit on the table. And if viewed at the right angle, I like to think that this line continuously flows around the piece, and that really dresses up the item. Now, let's scroll ahead here and take a look at our chucking problem here. Now, there's our nub, and we can't get to that area the way it is. So we're going to take a 2-inch disc sander and put it on my drill press, and I'm going to sand that area away, and I'm going to clean that area just as nice as the rest of the vessel. And then, of course, I'm going to sign it and date it. Okay, let's get into our burial urn section of our DVD.
So thanks for watching that. So we're going to talk about how to fit these with a lid now. And I'll narrate over what I'm saying here. Typically I would thread the base without putting an insert. Now I'm going to make an insert for these because not all wood's thread. And that's what I'm going to show you here.
I have one question here that we missed.
Yep.
Somebody wants to know, do you use compressed air to clean the chips out that when you're turning?
Always, yes, most definitely. Yep. You can't. It's much better than a vacuum because vacuum can't quite get it. But yeah, I use compressed air. This is a little hollow form. This is a pet urn here, and I'm going to fast forward through this, and you can kind of see. I'm going to turn it. I'm going to complete. This one's been roughed out. It's even got a date on it that you can see. And when I put it on the chuck, I've got to redo the tenon so it holds better. And this goes to the question that somebody asked: do I rough turn the interior or return the interior? And the answer is yes, of course. So this is how I fix up the tenon. So a little gouge work here, new tenon, put that into the chuck. There I am. Now I'm going to finish the exterior just with some shear scraping, decent shape. And that's shear scraping there. I'm just kind of talking, inlaid that a little bit there. Now this is where the threaded area is going to be. I'm going to make a little collar, a threaded collar out of boxwood. And so I make a little groove there where that washer is going to go. Now I'm hollowing the interior, getting that the way it should be. Let's fast forward through that.
Mike, what is this lathe that you have going there?
That's a VB36. It's a British-made lathe. I've got it down in the backside of my shop right now, and I use it for doing really large work. So yeah, that's what that is. There's a few of them out there. It's an incredibly heavy machine.
Thank you.
This is the Boxwood Insert. It's going to fit into the vessel. I'll go real time here, measuring that so it'll fit into the vessel. It's a kind of a delicate little piece of wood. You'll get to see what I'm making here. So I'm going to open it up. This is a dry piece of wood. It's very dry. And then that's where I'm going to put my thread right there. And in order to start a thread, I have to put a chamfer. So I just kind of soften that front edge there with a scraper. And now I'm going to start notice my chaser. My chaser will start at an angle. And then I'm going to strike the thread somewhere not on the front of the tooth, but somewhere in the middle. And the chaser has to be, so the rotation of the wood is down to say 400 or 500 RPM, so fairly slow. And I kind of do a song and dance with the tool, and then I strike the wood and put a spiral in the wood. There we go. And eventually it'll carve itself a nice little thread. And this is a 16 TPI thread, which is, so there's 16 threads in an inch. And you can see that chaser's fairly worn down. It's been used quite a lot. So there's my thread. Finishing up. Notice I'm straight back. I'm going straight and putting a parallel wall on it. And then I put a chamfer back in because that'll help take the lid. So I'm going to fast forward through that. So here's our lid material. That's the washer that I made. Now this is African blackwood. So this is a true rosewood. I'm going to make this is where the thread will be, the male thread. Getting my diameter just right. So this is going to be slightly larger than the ring that I made. And then this is a stop. You have to put a stop into the thread so you can run a chaser all the way across. You'll see what I'm talking about here. There's my male chaser. Notice I start at an angle and I'm slowing up my RPMs. I'm going to strike a spiral right into the front of that piece of wood there. And eventually I start moving the chaser closer and closer. It's a delicate operation. It's good. It's not easy to do. It's just something that takes practice. So I have to pull that chaser out before it hits the wall. And now I'm getting more parallel to making a proper thread. Now I've slowed up the RPMs even more so I can get close to that wall. And now you notice the chaser is parallel. So the thread will fit nicely. And then as soon as the thread will be done as soon as it looks just like the profile of the thread chaser. So I'm testing that to make sure it will fit the collar.
Are there any standard opening sizes for urns?
Not any longer. Most all the ashes now are basically powder. They grind it and you just pour it through a funnel and it'll fall into the opening. Yeah, I make mine fairly small. The human urns have about a 2-inch opening, and the pet urns even smaller. So I made a female threaded chuck. So my African blackwood piece now is threaded onto a piece of just waste wood. And now I'm just making my finial for the lid. This is a very traditional spindle thought. It's an acorn lid is what I would call it. I sand it, polish it, and thread it right onto my vessel, and that's your burial urn. And I'll open that up for questions. Let me. That's pretty much the end of that. And I apologize because when we first talked about that, I did. This was months ago when I talked with John about doing this demo, and I really never edited that out for this morning, and so I apologize for that. But I have a lot better subjects, I think, that are ready to go that we could talk about. But anybody want to ask questions on the burial urns before we go on to another subject?
Do you use the same thread, Mike, on all your urns?
No. So when you think about thread chasers, they all come in sizes. So I don't even know how low they go. So I have some thread chasers that are 8 TPI. So there's 8 threads in an inch, and I have them all the way up to 20 2, so much smaller threads. And depending on the wood, so if I want to thread a softwood like a pine or a fir or something, I'll use a really coarse thread like an 8 or a 10. But if I have some really fine wood like a rosewood, I'll probably use a much finer thread like a 20 or 18 or 22, because that wood will take a finer thread. And you think about this, the finer the thread, the more you have to turn it to get it on or off. And sometimes, on a burial urn, you'll never want to take it off. So it doesn't matter. I'm threading my urns because it's more crafty. You don't have to thread these. You could just do a plug fit and maybe even glue the top on when it's filled with ashes. So yeah, none of these are standards. There are no standards any longer. They leave it up to the state if there are any standards. There used to be federal standards on making urns, but there aren't any longer.
Hello, Mike.
Yes.
I don't know if you know Ron Brown at all, but he's now coming out with a little kit, and you can buy the male and female threaded pieces already. So if you don't want to do your own threading, which I like doing anyways, but you can buy them.
That's nice. Very good. Yeah. And I used to do something similar when I traveled. I used to give them out, but I made them out of PVC. And I don't know what Ron's using for his, but PVC makes a nice thread, or nylon or something like that. Anything else, anybody?
Mike, what finish do you use on your urns?
Thanks for that. They will all get a polymerizing oil, one that's homemade. I blend polyurethane 1/3, and then 1/3 boiled linseed oil, and then 1/3 mineral spirits. And that'll be my polymerizing oil. So that gives me the luster that I want with no film. Let that dry for a day or two, and then I spray lacquer, and then I buff that out with steel wool and wax, and that's the finish. Thank you for that. That's important.
You put anything on the interior?
Nothing. Leave it raw if you can. That's all. Yeah, I don't do anything on the interior.
Where do you get your thread chasers?
Nowadays, Carter & Sons makes a patented thread chaser that I designed. They were nice enough to take my design and make it. I wish I'm sure I have a picture of it here somewhere, but that's where I get them. But of course, most thread chasers are made in England or Germany. And up until, I learned thread chasing from Alan Batty, 30 years ago. And up till then, it was a very unknown craft in North America. And so all that technology came to us via Northern England, thanks to Alan.
And I have noticed that they do make, I found brass inserts that some company is making now for those.
Yeah, there's plenty of not only Ron Brown, but there's other companies that are selling those as well.
Because I've used the PVC on all of mine.
Okay.
And I'd like to get to where I try and chase my own threads. Yeah,
it's nice and it's easy. Thread chasing is kind of mysterious to some folks, and I know why. It's taught in a very difficult fashion, and if you go to Europe and you learn craft, the person who teaches you is never going to give you the whole story typically of how it's done, and they put a lot of pediments in front of you until you pay homage to. It's just interesting how, because I've been to Europe many times to learn certain techniques. And I always think to myself as a young, dumb American kid, I go, wow, when I get to my shop, I'm going to try it a totally different way. And, anyway.
Now, I get a question on thread chasing. Do your lids tighten up throughout different seasons?
Hopefully not.
That's a possibility, right?
Oh, most certainly. Yep. Because, if I made a lid here and then I shipped it off to Michigan, you folks are a lot more moist than here. It may have some trouble, but I am taking a lot of care in the drying process, and that's important. And then the second part is the material that I'm using to make the threads doesn't really adjust much in the weather. That piece of boxwood that I showed and that African blackwood they don't really change much in any environment because they don't transpire moisture like other woods. For instance, redwood is a very soft, soft wood, and it absorbs a lot of moisture and it expels a lot of moisture, whereas African blackwood doesn't change. It's so tightly poured wood that it doesn't absorb much moisture or excel it.
What about mesquite? Do you think that would work good? Because that's pretty solid.
Yeah, mesquite would be fine if you could find it without a crack in it. It's mesquite's prone to cracking.
So do you insert all of your threads?
No, most of the time now with these new Carter and Son thread chasers, I can thread just about any kind of wood. Granted, the thread may not be pristine, but it will thread.
So sometimes you actually, the urn itself, you'll thread.
Yep, most of the time if I can. I always do it that way now. But sometimes it's not going to thread. And even if it doesn't, I'll probably just add CA glue into that area and turn that threaded part into acrylic. And then I'm pretty justified that I know I'll make a thread in the base.
Mike, do you ever use a support arm when you're chasing? You watch like an Alan Beatty and he's always using a support arm with the chaser.
I would never do that. And that's the way I was taught. And so not everybody's knowing what we're talking about here, but in the old days, or in the old country, I should say, when you thread chased, you had Alan Batty would wear this collar, a leather collar with a support arm. It's basically an auxiliary tool rest. And I'm just using my finger here. And it was a piece of metal with a hook on the end of it. And if you can think about why Alan would have done that, or any of the thread chasers, is in Northern England where the production turning was going on. And by the way, I'm using Northern England as the example. There was, of course, turning going on all over Europe and Asia, all over the world, I suspect. But the English were really good at it, and they made high quality work, and they were very savvy in business. So they made a lot of turnings in production, and all those wares went around the world, and most of them were out of rosewoods and boxwoods. And anyway, the lathes that they worked on were 4, 5, 6 men worked on the same lathe, and the tool rest did not move. The tool rest was parallel to the bed of the lathe, and this auxiliary tool rest was used to drop over the parallel tool rest, and then they could perpendicularly work into a hollowed area to make a thread or a hollow form or something like that. So that's why they use that auxiliary tool rest. And again, I was taught that with the auxiliary tool rest, and I kept looking at Alan as he was teaching me how to do this. And I go, why don't we just move the tool rest perpendicular to the work, and you wouldn't need that. But tradition is very important for Northern Englishmen, and they said, no, this is the way it's done, and that's the way you do it. So once I left Northern England, I was at my own discretion to not use that tool, because it's really just a product of foregone era. It's not necessary. So thanks for the question.
Hey, what's your process for drying your hollow forms?
I just rough turn them. I'll wax the exterior and then time. The redwood dries so quickly. You know, within 60 days, I've got a dry form, even in the wintertime. But other woods, of course, if I did a walnut urn or something like that, the drying process would be much more lengthy.
You wax the outside, the dry, so it dries evenly from the inside. Otherwise,
yeah, I don't. Yeah, just wax the exterior. That would be fine. That's what I do, and I use a polyvinyl acetate. So PVA glue is what I use as a coating.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Do you thin that PVA glue down? Or?
Great question. Yes, I do. You have to thin it with water to make it spread well.
Okay. About what kind of ratio?
If I was a ratio guy, I'd say it was 10% water.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Any other questions, anybody?
Now, you talked about volume with human ashes. Yep. No matter what size a person is, it always comes down to 180, 190 cubic, whatever.
Correct. Cubic inches, yeah, correct.
Cubic inches.
So 3/4 of a gallon, basically.
Right. How does that work? I guess I'm like not understanding something.
Oh,
Person's 300 pounds and they're gonna, you know, melt down to 180 cubic inches.
Yes, they are. The fat and all that stuff vaporizes. Of course, you're getting lit up on fire and
right.
Yeah. So you might tell me that you had Grandpa Tom was 450 pounds and he was in a wheelchair, but he's going to fit in a 180 cubic inch urn. That's how that works. All the fat burns away.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Because we're like what 80% water or something. So
yeah,
you know, that's just water. Just yeah.
And you'd be surprised. I actually have filled a lot of these urns for people, and I probably in a 180 cubic inch urn that I make, 9 times out of 10, half of it is ashes, and even less sometimes. So I always wonder who's scraping up the ashes. You know, maybe I always thought sometimes it might be Portland cement. I don't know.
Hey, thank you by that way.
Yeah, thank you.
Just a quick technical question. Your monitor. What is your monitor that you're using? That you're highlighting on your videos and stuff. Right.
Yeah, I just have it's called Ink 2. It's a drawing program, and on the right side of myself here, there's a computer screen here that I can draw right on, and I could draw on my computer here that I'm talking to you on, but it's a little bit more difficult for me to do. But I could use this computer screen here to draw on, and I'll do that here on our next video. Because any other questions before we go on to something that's a little bit cleaner?
Yeah, I have one. Do you have a method that you measure to confirm the volume inside of urn, just to be certain that there is 180?
Yes, I do. The only way to really do that without going through some serious math equation is make a vessel, pour a known amount of rice into that vessel to see if that would work. That's definitely a good way to do it. That's how I started doing it, to make sure. But I always oversize the urn, just because you don't want to sell an urn that's not going to fit somebody. So all my urns are definitely oversized.
Hey, Mike, when you get, whether you do it now or later, will you talk about the cleft that you do when you do a tenon? Could you talk about how it helps you visualize the bowl kind of extending into the base?
Yeah, let me share my screen here, and I'm gonna let's go to a whiteboard. And so just like that little hollow form that actually let's just do a bowl. So here's my bowl coming down here. And then I make a little clefted surface here. And then I have a tenon that holds obviously where my chuck is. And so what that does is I can visualize a smaller base through that surface. So let's say you didn't have that clefted surface and the line comes down there and dead ends right there. And then you chuck on this surface there, right? So you're not gonna hollow to the interior of the actual form that you make. I think I'm screwing things up here. I've confused us here. Let me draw that again. I don't know why that's so thin. Let's use a hollow form here. Clefted surface there. There's my chuck right there, my dovetail. So the actual shape of this vessel, that line is going to come down from here to here. And then I'm going to hollow to that shape because I can see it from the outside because I'm visualizing the line here stopping at the wood here and then continuing into the base of the piece. But if I didn't do that, I'd have this line here. And now something's going to have to change because the form is not going to look nice with that big heavy base. So that's why I do that. So it gives me the ability to make a much smaller base for my work. That's why I do that. And
does the clef help with keeping down vibration or support?
Yeah, it allows me, I always use the largest tenon I could use. And I'm successful with a lot of my work because of the size of the tenon. The smaller the tenon gets, the easier it is to knock out a round or fall out. So I work with a much larger chucking device so I can be more aggressive and make the job fast. And of course, making the job fast is important when you make for a living. So like my salad bowls start with a 50% tenon. So a 10-inch bowl will have a 5-inch tenon. And most folks don't even have a chuck that will grip 5 inches. So that's not part of the plan. But I would highly recommend any wood turner to use larger tenons because of the safety and security of a larger tenon. And so that clefted surface allows me to see a smaller base but use a much larger tenon. So hopefully that was a good explanation. It kind of felt like I got the explanation there at the end, but the drawing didn't really work too much. Anybody?
Yeah, help, thanks.
I have another question on the board here that's probably going to lead into what you're going to show us next. How can I buy a Platter Blank from you?
You just go to my website and you can see my phone number, and you'll call me and tell me what diameter you want. Because I have sizes from anywhere from 10 to 24 inches in diameter, and I just would rather talk to you personally if you want to buy a platter or a bowl blank.
Okay. Yeah,
and I'll send you a picture of the item and tell you how much it's going to spend. I don't want to be an advertisement here, but that's how I make my living nowadays, is selling bowl blanks and platter blanks to other wood turners.
How do anyone get a hold of you to get one of your urns?
Again, you can call me. I'm very accessible. Just go to my website. You'll see my phone number, and you can call me. And I've made a half a dozen burial urns this month, so quite busy in that department.
Thank you.
Very good.
I've bought quite a few roughed out bowls from Mike. He's really easy to deal with.
Was that you, Jim?
Yes.
Yeah, Jim. Yeah. Jim has bought a lot of bowl blanks from me over the years, and probably platters that I know of. But yeah, so I just sent him one in the mail yesterday, UPS. So I'm going to share my screen here, and you can see a series of videos here. I'm going to talk to you about Quarter-Sawn White Oak, or just Quarter-Sawn oak in general. So in Michigan, can somebody unmute themselves and tell me the types of oaks that you know of that are in the area?
Red and white.
Well, it shouldn't be that easy.
Black.
Do we have a black oak?
We have pin oak here and
swamp oak,
bur oak, all those names for oaks. So somebody spoiled my thunder there. Red and white. There are 450 species of oaks in the world, but they fall into two categories: reds and whites. And that's important for us to know as woodworkers, because there are important differences. Now, the way to tell the difference between a red and a white oak is by their leaves. And oaks are as variable as human beings. We said pin oak, black oak, bur oak, all those are forms of reds or white oaks. I don't know, I do know what a pin oak is. A pin oak is a red oak. So if you were walking around the neighborhood and you pointed out to somebody and you said, that's a red oak, when it was a pin oak, you would be correct. Because red oaks breed with red oaks, other red oaks. They don't breed with white oaks, and white oaks breed with other white oaks. So just in the area that I live here, we have 2 or 3 varieties of white oaks, and those will breed with each other, and they'll create offspring that look a little bit of the same of their parents. So just like humans, oaks are hybrids, and typically you won't find pure stands of oaks in anywhere, and they're hard to identify because they're so variable. But all the common names, all that, they all fall under reds or whites. And for a woodworker like myself, who makes items of utility, and you're going to use the item that I make, I want to use white oaks. White oaks do not transpire moisture as red oaks do. So the white oak leaf will have a soft lobe like this. Regardless of the shape of the leaf, the white oaks have a soft lobe. And then let me start my video here. You'll see a red oak leaf here in a second. So this would be kind of like your pin oak leaf. And those are sharp points there on the leaf there. So that designates the difference between the white oaks and the red oaks. And so if you made a red oak bowl, you just have to know that if you put salad dressing in that, it's going to be on the tablecloth below, if that was of any consequence that might be important. You guys did see the wine barrels here in my shop. They're always made out of white oak. And humans have used oaks, obviously, because oak is probably one of the most successful tree species in the world because of its variability. It grows at sea level almost all the way up into alpine. It does grow into alpine areas. So it's a very variable tree. It can grow in a lot of different situations, unlike, let's say, quaking aspens or walnuts. Even walnuts are not a very successful tree. There's not many species of walnut trees. Just something to think about. So white oaks are important for us as woodworkers, I think. Red oaks are too, if you're doing flat work. But this is what's interesting about oaks, is they're very strong with a medullary ray. So you can see this dark line emanating out of the log there. That is a medullary ray. Now, all woods have medullary rays, but oaks are very visual. You can see them. And oak is, most of us are not using oak, I bet, as wood turners. And we should, because it's a beautiful wood, but it's beautiful, especially beautiful when it's quarter sawn. So if you can take your chainsaw and cut down that medullary ray, let's call that a platter blank right there. We're 2 inch. My drawing isn't that good. Let's do that again. It's still not very good. So there's a platter blank there. We'll call that, or a plate or whatever. And then another platter blank I'll make right here, another one right here, and another one right here. These are all quarter-sawn bits of wood because I've cut with the medullary ray. Now, if you look at the side of that board, you'll see a nice, beautiful flecking, and that's the side of the medullary ray that you've cut through. So when we talk about quarter-sawn, this is what we're talking about. Now, quarter-sawn, these are the 4 quarters, but you can also get a lot more quarters out of this board. As long as I cut through the medullary ray, and notice now the boards get smaller and smaller as we go. And these would all be true quarter-sawn pieces of wood. Now, also notice what's important about a quarter-sawn piece of wood. Not only is it going to be visually pretty, the annual rings going through the board are basically straight lines. So when we make a plate or a platter out of this item, it's not going to warp because it doesn't have any tension on it. Unlike, let's just say you made a platter blank out here. Now you've got annual rings going through the board like this. And when this, if you dried this properly and did everything that you're supposed to do to make a platter, it's still going to warp and cup over time because of how the rings are placed in the board. So that's the consequences of quarter-sawn wood. And you see people using this for platter blanks, but it's really not a good piece of wood for that. You really would rather have a quarter-sawn piece instead of a flat sawn there. Any questions on that, anybody?
What about the warpage as it dries? Does the quarter-sawn change dimensions, or does it stay pretty well round?
It does. It's very stable. It doesn't change, again, because the rings are straight into the board. There's no arc into them like they would be. And the bigger the tree, the less that arc is anyway. So in the tree that you're looking at right now is a 36-inch diameter trunk. So it's a big tree. So that platter blank right there is 18 inches. So it's a big chunk of wood, 2 inches thick. And also I wanted to say something why many of our wood turners are not using oaks is it's to make bowls, for instance. Even though it makes a beautiful bowl, the difference in moisture content in oak is great. So this is the heartwood area here, and you're looking at about 15 to 20% moisture there. And out here in the sapwood area, you're talking 65% moisture. So when you rough out a bowl, you're getting a lot of tension because of the difference in moisture contents between the heart and the sapwood. How do we fix that? Well, the best way to do it is find a dead standing tree, and then the moisture is going to be more equal. Or you just slow up the drying process when you rough turn a piece of oak. And so this quarter-sawn piece is going to be easy to dry, but the bowl that I've drawn here is going to be difficult to dry because of the lack of moisture here in the heart and the great moisture there in the sap. So you just slow up the process, double coat it with your greenwood sealer, maybe stick it in a plastic bag, and whatever you can do to slow up the process. Because when wood dries and dries too fast, what happens is that moisture is wisping out of the wood too quickly, and the wood cells don't have time to dehydrate and create a structure, so they collapse. So the slower that moisture can ease out of the wood, the better the opportunity to not have cracks. And that's the key. All the pieces that I make here in my shop don't have cracks in them. Well, some do crack, not many, maybe 1%, but the stuff that I sell and stuff that I make never has cracks in it. And that is a thought process more than it is anything. I don't want to make work with defect in it. And that, again, that's just the way I view the world. Defects get my work closer to the trash bin. And that's why I don't glue cracks or put turquoise in cracks, because it's just not my style. So something to think about. Any questions out there, anybody?
I have a question on your quarter-sawn platter blank. Do you typically use the sapwood and the
yeah, great question. Thank you, Dave. Exactly. I would combine those two in the platter blanket. It's a nice contrast. So yeah, they definitely do get used, and they don't tend to dry difficult at all.
Thanks.
So just a comment here, Mike. Yep. If you know anybody that has a sawmill, or if you're using a chainsaw to do it, you can just take that center pith piece out, make it whatever width you want. I usually do 2 inches, and cut the pith out, and then I've got a nice either Peppermill Blank or I got a Platter Blank. Yeah, of course. Yep. And I do this all with chainsaw, and you're going to watch me dissect this really large white oak tree here. And the reason I'd use the chainsaw is I could be a little more accurate with the cuts, as a sawmill typically is a little less discriminate about how the wood's cut. And I could really get close to cutting straight through the medullary ray, the complete ray. There's the medullary ray again. I'm pointing at it there. I'll draw on it, and I'm going to run my saw, hopefully, through the same medullary ray up and down the log to create the quarter-sawn fleck look that we're looking at. And I'm just going to speed through this here because it's just me cutting the wood. It's obviously wintertime here. I've got a long sleeve shirt on. There's the medullary ray again. And this particular oak isn't really strong with a medullary ray. It's a thin one. Many oaks have a much thicker ray. And let's look at the side of the board. There's your flecking. That's the medullary ray when it's cut on the side. And that makes for a very beautiful piece of wood. Any questions, anybody? I'm going to fast forward this here and show you how I make the blanks.
Mike, do other woods have that much higher moisture content than the sapwood?
Yes, there's a lot of woods that have that same issue. Yep, every wood's different. Yep. So I'm screwing the chunk of wood on here, 2-inch thick blank, maybe a little thicker than that. I use a screw chuck because I'm a production person, and that's the best, easiest way to hold on to something like this. I'm going to rough turn this. Now, somebody's going to ask me, why would you rough turn it? Why don't you just dry it in that square blank form? And the reason is it's more apt to crack if it's not shaped a little bit. And so again, I don't want to store those blanks and lose them to cracking. So this is the process. I rough turn it. A typical platter blank would have a 50% base. So if this is a 16-inch piece of wood, the base would be 8 inches. And I plan all this in when I rough turn it, and then think about the finish process as well. Just quickly, I'll run through this, and then we'll talk about the more important highlights of what we're watching here. That's the bottom of the platter. Tailstock back up. Always use the tailstock if it's not in the way. Now, this is the top side of the platter. You can kind of see some steam coming off the wood there. Now, watch what my gouge does here in a second, because this is important. For the drying process, right there, I don't want to leave my wood in right angles. And you see a sharp edge there as well. I'm going to soften that, and I'm going to soften this. And the reason that is it's going to dry a lot better. And I even do this with everything that I make when I rough turn. Even the bowls, when I rough turn a bowl, I won't leave that sharp edge. I will soften it like this. Because that sharp edge there are tension surfaces. It's going to dry a lot quicker on that sharp edge. So I'd rather soften it all up and therefore leave that tension out of it on the larger pieces. That's definitely a benefit to do. Any questions, anybody? Okay.
What's the best way to tell if somebody brings you a chunk of oak and you don't know understand red and white, but sometimes the variances is so close. Is there a way to tell the difference?
You know, there probably is, and the only difference I could tell a lot of times is if the pore is a lot larger, the pore look, but typically red oaks do have a red tinge to them. So that is helpful. But I don't know that for a fact because I haven't seen all the different oaks in the world. So I'm assuming like here, we have more red oaks than white oaks here. And almost always that red oak, it has a red tinge to them. So I imagine that's why they got their name. I don't know that either, but I'm guessing. So yeah, that's kind of what I would say, but it's always nice to see the leaf for sure. So there's the rough sawn platter there, and you can see that just out of a common, simple piece of oak, you get a beautiful chunk of wood because of the quarter sawn nature of it. So now this piece is going to be dried, and I'm going to use a polyvinyl acetate, white glue basically, to coat this. I buy it in 5-gallon bucket forms off the internet, and then coat it with, I mixed water in with this to make it a little easier to spread. And then oak is very easy to dry. It dries quickly. Within probably here about 120 days, I've got a dry platter blank. And this is why this video is made, because I sell these and I want other wood turners to go make a platter blank similar to this. And that's why I make this video, so they can kind of attempt to do it the way I do it. So 120 days, 200 days later, we take this same platter blank and after it's dried, and then we make a finished one. And so this is how I do it. I take the outside diameter of my chuck and measure that. That's going to be my recess. Then I chuck up the piece. I give you two options. You can chuck up the area that I left through the drying process right there. That makes a good tenon. Or you could put it back on the screw. So I show you both ways. I typically would put the screw back on because a lot of times it makes for a little bit less warping when it's true turned. So here I am, I'm just setting up to turn the dry piece. I'll speed us up here.
So Mike, when you rough turn those, you're leaving that thickness under the chuck?
Yeah, thank you for noticing that. And it doesn't make a bit of difference there since it's quarter-sawn. It may have a little crack in that area, but it's all going to get turned away. And I leave that there because I can't get to it. And it's just it would be one more process to get rid of it. So we're talking about the area that I couldn't get to where the chuck is right there.
Seems like that would make it want to crack more.
No, since it's quarter-sawn, it works out just fine. So here I am on the back side or the bottom of the platter, making it all run true. I'm going to keep a very simple design, just a soft OG curve. We'll talk about that here. But again, I'm just scraping here with a gouge. The oak takes a nice cut regardless. That's just kind of showing you the shear scraping nature of what I'm doing there. Now here's the bottom of the platter. I'm basically scraping that surface with a gouge. No fancy cuts at all. I'm going to take that nub off. Now I'm going to make our tenon, or recess, I should say. And I'm flattening off this surface, and I'll get this area flat relative, and I'll use a straight edge. There's a straight edge to check my flatness. This is my recess. I make that diameter the exact size as the chuck closed up. There's a spindle gouge. I'll make my little dovetail there. And then notice I'm going to switch to another gouge right here. There's a bottom feeder right there. Now look at the pigtail that comes off of that. That's an end grain fiber cut going directly at center like that. But cuts beautifully, and that area is difficult to sand well, and I want that all the wood to be cut very cleanly. Because I don't want to do a lot of sanding, and that's what that particular grind did for me. Now, this is a 16-inch diameter platter, so I want an 8-inch base. 8 inches, 50% of the total diameter, and that's a good base to start with for a platter. You want the base to be fairly large to keep it stable. I'll move my drawing. There's my profile here. Very simple. So let's talk what that is. A cove here, going to a bead, and then there's my base. And then the base is recessed like this.
Okay, turn it back on then.
And then the top is going to come down here like this with a little detail there, and then come in here. So that's what's going to happen here when we finish up.
Oh, okay.
So now I'm just going to crisp up the little details that I've made there. Crisping up means I'm going to cut these surfaces clean, and so there'll be little sanding there. So the backside is done. I'm going to sand it 120, 180, 220, 320, 400. And I'll speed through this because nobody's going to want to watch sanding. But there is something here to talk about because the sanding process, of course, means a lot. And so I'm hand sanding all the areas that the power sander can't get to. And then I'm using compressed air to blow the surface clean every time I change grits, because what destroys paper is itself and heat. So I want to take the 120 grits off of the wood to go to the 180. And what I'm doing here is I'm burnishing the surface of the wood. So I've gone all the way to 400 grit. Then I cleaned it with air compression. And then I'm going to use a worn out piece of 400 grit to burnish the wood. And that puts a little bit of shine on the surface. And you'll see as I take this off, there'll be a little bit of shine on the wood. And that is caused from the sanding process and not the finishing process. Since I want this item to be used, I'm not going to use a film finish. I'm going to use a penetrating oil finish. So there will be no shine. So the only shine the surface of this wood will get is from the sanding process. So notice I chucked up into a very small, thin recess, and that's going to be fine. So I'm going to use my tailstock up because there's not a lot holding this item. Anybody have any questions they want to add to? Or
is your recess about 1/8 of an inch?
Yeah, it's an eighth of an inch deep. That's about it. I don't want to overdo that because I don't do anything after the recess. So it's going to be exactly the way I cut it, and it's going to hopefully look like a detail. The general public will never know how I actually chucked it up, but wood turners would. But as long as that area is clean and it's not deep, and in the old days they used to put felt in there. It's just not necessary if you make it look right. So here I am, I'm working on the rim now. And the rim is probably going to be about 10% of the total diameter. Right here, I'm just taking those sharp edges off of the rim because those will cut you. I've obviously been cut many times from these edges, so I'm just telling you right now, just go ahead and soften those up so they won't cut you. Now the rim here is going to be convex. None of my work has a flat on it, so I wouldn't make my rim flat. That little detail there is just, that's all it is a detail. And I want to break up that line, and that's why there's a detail there. And then I'm just showing you that 10% of this diameter is rim. And you can play with that all you want. You can make it thinner or thicker. It's your choice. So I'm just cleaning up the little detail. And now we can go to the interior of the form of the platter. So I'm just going to kind of rough out the dish here, rough it in. And I'm using a I'm using a very large gouge. This is a 3/4 inch gouge. And you can see it leaves an evenly spaced line as I cut. And that is the length of my bevel. So this tool is not exactly the tool you want as a finish cutter. It's just a bulk removal tool. And then when I do go to finish cutting here, I am going to go to a 3/8 inch gouge, and I'll show you that here in a second as the finish cutter.
What's your finish thickness?
It's probably 3/8 of an inch all the way through. It's a fairly thick item. I like them thick because it feels like they're usable. If you make them too thin, people think they're fragile and they won't use it. So here I am setting up to make that interior cut. And notice I've left a lot of bulk here. There's still a lot of bulk in this surface here. You want that there to make this cut here. So I'm getting set up for a 3/8 inch bowl gouge. And I'm gonna stop us here and talk about this. So what you don't see in this image is the gouge is actually held horizontally. So the handle is held horizontally to the cutting edge. And that's important here because this is like the interior of a bowl or platter. When you're on that top rim there, if you don't hold the tool properly, it's going to shoot off to the left there and catch. And the reason that is happening is because your tool is not held horizontal. A lot of times you'll go into this cut with the handle down, like you think that's supposedly the correct thing to do. What's happening and what causes that is if you hold the handle down, the tip of the tool, in this case, on your gouge, there's a point, the highest spot. You want to make contact with that point first to the rotating object. If you hit below the point, it's going to catch and shoot you to the left. And that's what causes that. So be aware, in order to make that cut, make sure you make with the highest point of the gouge, the point of the gouge. Anybody questions on that? So there's my interior cut there. I'm going to speed us up through that. Very short bevel on this tool, so it didn't leave a groove behind like that bigger tool. So once I've determined that that's the finished cut, I can get rid of the interior now. And I'm just going to scrape that out with my big gouge. And notice I'm cutting towards, I'm cutting towards the chuck, and I'm not cutting towards the center because that center cut would be an end grain fiber cut, and it would be much more heat would be created and more strength to make that cut. So let's just scrape all this away, and then I'm going to use a round nose scraper to finish up. So here's my round nose scraper. The tool handle is held above the cutting edge, therefore I don't catch, and I make it, hopefully I make some good tool work there. A nice smooth line. You don't want it to be undulated or anything because that will reflect light. And so that's basically the platter. And then again, I go through the sanding process. Let's go through the sanding process again. And then we're going to put a finish on it. And I'll write my name on it. And then we'll talk quickly about the finish, which looks like an advertisement, and I'm sorry for that. But since we've made this and we want it to be used, I'm very particular about the finish because I don't want to put a film finish on this item if I want it to be used. And what's a film finish? That would be polyurethane, varnish, lacquer, French polish, all those things. So here's walnut oil. This is my walnut oil. And that's a penetrating oil finish. So the beauty of this finish is anybody and their grandparents and grandkids can apply it. It doesn't take skill, unlike the other finishes we talked about, the film finishes that take skill. You might say a wipe-on poly is relatively skillless. It doesn't take a lot of skill. But once you put that film on the piece and it gets used and that film breaks down, then that film has to be repaired. And now that process takes a lot more skill than this. So when this oil dissipates, you can just reapply more oil to rejuvenate it. So that's why I would choose a penetrating oil finish for a utility object over a filmed type finish. So that's basically the whole video or the whole subject in a nutshell. You can see the sun coming through here in my shop. But anybody have any questions out there?
Yeah, I have a question on the bottom of the platter. I often get, after I get my finish, I find I've got little rings that I didn't really notice when I was sanding. How do you keep the bottom of the platter absolutely flat?
How do I make it flat?
I just find that after it's dried and everything, I'll see that I wasn't as close to flat as I thought I was.
Yeah, good question. Here's how I did it, and we actually showed it at the beginning, but I didn't really explain it much. Let's back up here. Let's see, at the start, let's see. So I get the straight edge, blah, 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 finish. So right here, I take a straight edge right there. But let's stop it. So back up there. So really, if I said flat, that's not the whole story. When I do actually make the tenon in here, the recess, the only area that's going to touch the table is this area here. And everything else is concave. So therefore, you can guarantee yourself to lay flat on the table. Let's fast forward here and do the recess and the base. Right there. So there's our base. It's not the best picture here. It's a little bleached. So right there. So this is the highest spot of the base right there. None of this area here is even remotely touching the table. I've lowered that a bit, so it's not going to wobble. So I think that's the answer to your question. Is that not correct?
I'm sorry, I meant more on the bottom of the other side of the platter.
Oh, okay. Let's clear this off. And so the interior of the platter. Yeah, and I kind of talked about that here. Let's get to the round nose scraper. So the interior of this, this is going to be the lowest spot of the bowl. Let's call it a bowl. And you're going to want a nice smooth line right to that. And if there's any undulations, and like you said, I would get your lighting better in your shop so you can see if there's any undulations. But more importantly, I would feel this area. I would run my hand all through this area here to see if I could feel those undulations, because feeling is a lot easier than seeing in this scenario. And if you do that wrong, it's really going to not look nice in your platter, because it'll reflect light, and it's just not, and it's going to be loved as much, I think. And early turnings that you've done when you first get started, you may not understand those nuances, but as a professional, I make sure that's always done well, because again, talking about craft in general and my life as a craftsperson, I'm very particular that my work will outlast my life. So by doing this process, what I think is correct, I use the right timber, I use the right dimensions, I use the right tooling and the proper wood for all this. Hopefully this will outlast my life and will be a useful item for anyone who has this item. In my mind, if you came and ate dinner at my house, you're going to eat off of wood dishes, and you're going to be served off of wooden platters and things like that. And you're going to eat on a wooden top. And all those surfaces are usable surfaces. And so I look at these items as wrinkles on a face in scenarios. The reason I put a penetrating oil finishes on them is to highlight the grain more than anything. The only thing that will keep these items from staining is a film finish. But if staining is an issue for you, then I would say porcelain or plastic or metal is a better option. Wood is a beautiful item. And I'm going to show you my dinner plate here. This is a dinner plate that I've used in my house for 30 years, and it's got cut marks. It's got stains from olives or turkey or cranberry or whatever we put on that. And like I said, I think of these items and those defects on them as history. And also, I think it looks prettier today than the day I made this item. And by the way, this item has never had a finish on it. It doesn't, since it's my personal plate, I never put a finish on it because I'm just going to cut on this anyway. And the finish isn't for preservation. It's only for typically highlighting grain and things like that. So if now you know why I wouldn't put a film finish on any item of utilities, because of its ability to break down. And a lot of my competition in the salad bowl business do use film finishes, and I just think it's inappropriate because, and again, nothing's wrong about it. It's just, if you like that look and you use that bowl, that film is going to go away, and therefore you're going to have to replenish it somehow through a skillful operation. And if you're using polyurethane or varnish or something like that, typically you don't just patch those finishes, you have to strip them and then reapply them. And if you came to me to want a repair of a film finish, I'd say, why don't you just buy a new bowl, because it's going to be a lot more expensive to make that bowl or make that finish right than just buy a new bowl, because that's how much skill is involved in time to finish it.
Question.
Go ahead.
You use walnut oil as your finish? What do you think about boiled linseed oil?
It would be fine. Boiled linseed oil is not boiled. It's a flax seed with a metallic dryer in it to make it dry faster. The problem with linseed oil typically is its ability to oxidize. So it would take, let's say you put it on a maple, it turns the maple yellow and brown over time. Unlike walnut oil, really doesn't color much at all. Same with tung oil, it oxidizes fairly well. And I would use it on a darker wood like walnut where you wouldn't notice it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for wood burning on oak? I've always struggled to get a smooth line going across the pores.
It's horrible. I use a really small, tight arc, and it's hard to do. And don't push hard. Get the wand hot and go over it lightly. That's all I can say, because I signed my name to that platter, and you'll notice how poorly done it looked. It's not really good, but that's all you can do. Thanks for that.
I have a question about the proportion of the rim, the 10%.
Yep.
Where did you come up with that? And what do you think of the 1/3, 2/3?
Well, that would be inappropriate for this. I understand what your question is, but see, 10% is this bit right here. That's 10%. So you measure that across, you'll get 10 parts. I use that I actually don't measure it. I just visualize it, but I measured it one day and I thought, wow, it's really close to 10%. Now, like I said, you can make your rims thinner or you can make them thicker. You'll know it when you see it if it looks out of scale. Well, 9 out of 10 of us will, but because design is very subjective. And if you make a thicker, maybe a 20% rim, or you may be out of scale and it won't look right, but there are no set rules. I just kind of say those things as a place to start. So thank you for that question. Now the 1/3, 2/3 is different because you really couldn't do that here, because let's just say you wanted 2/3 of an opening here, and then the rest of it 1/3 being rim. It's really out of scale, I think, as compared to a holoform or a bowl. So yeah, thank you for that. I think I
you embellish your rims ever?
No, I kind of leave everything fairly native. I don't like to color or do anything, mainly because I'm not good at it. So I keep it all natural. All my work is right off the lathe. And I'm always a big fan of beautiful wood. I work with beautiful wood. I harvest beautiful wood. And so I always like to highlight the beautiful wood, and to add things like burning or coloring is just not in my nature. And as long as I'm working with pretty wood, that's my highlight.
Do you have a sketch of your typical profile? Or I know what we've seen bits and pieces of it, but have you got a handout or something that we could see the overall shape of?
Yeah, I guess I don't have a sketch. I'm going to grab a platter here behind me. Let's see, the sun shining here in my eye. This is a white oak piece, and it's not going to show up very well. Kind of see there's a cove here going to a bead going into the base. That's my recess, obviously. Yeah, I guess, somebody mentioned it a while back. You should just cut one of these in half, and that would show a little better. But by the way, this is white oak. I'm going to show you another piece of white oak. Look how much lighter this wood is compared to this. But these are identical pieces of wood. The difference is this one went through an ammonia chamber. I fumed the wood to make the wood pop and put a little bit more detail into the grain. So the ammonia chamber is basically a trash can with household ammonia in a little yogurt cup. And when I finish the platters, not with finish, they're just the rough wood, the sanded wood, and I drop the platters in the ammonia chamber where the ammonia will fume, and I put a lid on it, and it fumes the wood. It colors up the wood and makes the medullary rays pop. I appreciate that look more than I do just the raw white oak.
I think it's a good thing to mention if you can do that, to have really great ventilation, you'll hurt yourself bad.
Yes, of course. And I hear that all the time because I've done talks like this about the ammonia chamber, and somebody will always send me an email. Oh boy, I'm really worried that somebody's going to inhale the ammonia. And if I didn't think of mentioning that, because it kind of seems if you're going to take a hit of ammonia, you're going to know it. And so yeah, some of those safety protocols I kind of leave out just because I think they're innately obvious. But you're right, you don't want. And somebody said you had to use the commercial brand of ammonia to do the fuming. It's not true. This regular $3 a half gallon ammonia from the grocery store works fine for me.
Hey, Mike, do you use your walnut oil and wax as a separate finish, or you just always use that as something on top of your walnut oil to create more gloss?
Yeah, the latter. The reason my finish, the Mahoney's oil wax, is made is because typically paste waxes have petroleum distillates in them. So I needed a food safe type of wax. And so my galleries in the day when I used to run that, I would give my galleries a little bit of paste wax, my paste wax that was food safe, so they can shine the bowls up in the gallery, so they make them a little bit more dramatic. People that buy these things who need to be attracted by a little bit more shine. The problem with waxes as a shine is they have no durability. So if you put that on your bowl and then you washed it, you wash away the wax immediately. But having said that, there's a lot of other uses for these waxes and again, they're not your typical paste wax. Paste waxes, typically, if you buy one from Minwax or Liberon or whoever makes these paste waxes, they're adding petroleum distillates to these. And basically, by heating these waxes and adding a petroleum distillate, you're changing the chemistry of the wax and making it basically a plastic, a polymer. And you're going to get a lot more shine from that product than you are from mine, because mine's blended with walnut oil. So it doesn't change the chemistry of the wax. But again, mine's food safe, whereas those other paste waxes are highly toxic to humans when it gets on their skin, and you certainly don't want to eat it.
So if you're just using the walnut oil for a utility bowl, the walnut oil is more than adequate.
Yep, I think so. But again, having said that, I do use it all the time for lots of other operations. If you think about what woodworkers use waxes for, if you want things to slide easier on tabletops, my wax is perfect for that. And then, of course, I wax my bandsaw top and my lathe bed, all that stuff with that wax. And it's great because I don't have to put a glove on to use it.
Do you raise the grain before your final sanding?
Great question. Yes, I always do. That's what's missing in this video. But just after my 400 grit, I have a little misting bottle that's on the tailstock of my lathe, and I mist the wood with water, and then I sand it back immediately with a worn out piece of 400 grit, and that knocks the fur off the raised grain. And I don't use a new grit because that will knock that fur right down to the base. So I use a worn out 400 to knock that fur off after I've moistened it, and then therefore it will never come back. And that's called deburring. And it's wood related as well. Certain woods fur up more than others. Maples and oaks certainly fur up, so I make sure I moisten them before the finish sanding. And then walnuts doesn't really fur much at all. But it's wood.
Is that the burnishing that you were talking about?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So you moisten sand while it's dry.
I didn't quite hear that.
So you moisten it, your spray bottle, and then while it's still wet, you get your.
Yeah, I don't get it so wet that you can't sand it. It's just a light mist, enough to raise the grain, and then within 30 seconds, I could sand it. Any other questions? Keep going.
Yeah, I have a question backing up to urns again. And you mentioned the base and the width of the base for an urn as opposed to just a simple hollow form. Is there a ratio you use for how wide you want to be at the base of an urn? Does that make sense? Am I clear in the question?
You know, I'm sorry, you're not. I don't know if it was me or you, but you're breaking up a little bit. And go ahead with the question quickly.
Yeah, it's probably me. I have low bandwidth here.
Me too.
The width of the base on an urn as opposed to a decorative hollow form. I know you mentioned you want it wider. Maybe I missed it, but is there a ratio you use for the width to make them more stable at the base?
No, not on the hollow form. Not on the hollow forms. I know if it's going to be a burial urn, the base is going to be a little larger than a hollow form that's just going to be visual and for visual effects. So I will widen the base. Now, I do have ratios for everything else, but you know, the bowl of making a bowl, of course, is 1/3 of the total diameter. The platter here, 50% of the total diameter. Now, if I'm making a dinner plate like this here, it's going to have a 80 to 90% base because you want those items to be very stable. But the hollow forms, it's kind of a guess. Yeah.
What is the, do you use the, your glue formula on your hollow forms as well as your flat work?
Yeah, I use it on everything. Because again, I harvest my own wood and I dry it. So I'm using that on just about, even this is a oops, oh, dropped it. This is a Peppermill Blank. It's a very big Peppermill Blank, as you can see. These have all, in order, you know, these are a byproduct of my bowl business and my platter business. When I have wood that's just too nice to burn or throw away, I make cylinders out of them because I like a peppermill with a little bit more shape than the typical peppermill that you see. It's tall and thin. It's really hard to get a nice shape on them. Matter of fact, just as in passing, talking here, when I make an item like a peppermill, and let's just say I'm not adept at making peppermills, I probably would Google images of wooden peppermills, and I would look at the hundreds, if not thousands, of images that Google will bring up to you, and I choose a shape that I like, and that's how I might copy something of interest of me. Well, anyway, these peppermills, and if you've seen some of my peppermills, they're quite odd looking because they're a lot more voluptuous than your typical peppermill. This is a cylinder from my bowl business, and notice I've also I've turned it into a cylinder. I've softened the edge, not left it in the right angle like we talked about, and then I greenwood seal or my glue the end grain of that, and then these store for years, and then I make a hollow form or a peppermill out of them. So yeah, I use glue on all those items to seal them up, of course. Well, anything else, folks? Let's open it up.
Boy,
pretty quiet out there.
So we're all asleep.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
What I was wondering with the Mahoney's walnut oil, is that good to use on cherry, maple bowls and everything?
Yeah, I would think so. You know, if it's a utility object, I would think so.
Yep.
It'd be fun. It's great for my retirement.
I'll promote it. I use it on almost everything I turn.
Oh, thank you so much. You know, that oil came from a project I did in college. My neighbors, I lived in an old Italian neighborhood in San Diego where I went to college, and they would always use walnuts. The wife would chop up a bunch of walnuts, English walnuts in this case, and she'd put them in cheesecloth and she'd rub her furniture with them. And she said in the old country, they used walnuts as a polishing agent for all their furniture.
Can you hear that?
And so what I did, I thought that'd be great for my salad bowls because I was making bowls in college, and I learned about the chemistry about walnuts and walnut oil in general. And the reason walnut oil is a better finish than other natural oils like almond or olive or cannabis oil now or coconut oil, all those things, is walnut oil is very high in a specific acid called linoleic acid. And that's what makes it stable. And so therefore it doesn't go rancid like other oils. more because of that high acid content. So what I did is I found a manufacturer of walnut oil, and I asked them if because typically culinary walnut oils aren't good for wood finishes because they've lowered that acid to make them more palatable for the tongue. And also, I had to learn how to destroy the protein that may cause an allergy to make this a usable oil. And so by heat treating the oil, we destroy the protein that may cause an allergy, and then we filter that out. And that's basically what Mahoney's walnut oil is. And I've been doing that for, when did I leave college? 86. So quite a long time ago. And Dale Nish, it was Dale Nish's idea to actually put it in a bottle. He always said, Mike, you got to bottle that. And I thought, no, I don't have time for that. I'm a wood turner. And he said, you could sell it. We'll sell it for you at Craft Supply. So I did, and it turned out to be something really cool. But at the time, I was so busy wood turning that my wife handled that part of the business. And I was making, 3,500 bowls a year. So not a whole lot of time to do much of anything else.
So the difference between that would make your Mahoney's walnut oil different than what I go down to Whole Foods and buy myself a pint of walnut oil. It's not really what you would recommend for putting in a bowl.
No, because that particular culinary oil is going to it won't dry, it'll evaporate. So it's more like mineral oil. Mineral oil is an excellent wood finish for these items, but it requires more maintenance because it evaporates as an evaporative oil. Therefore, you're going to be applying it more often. Whereas my walnut oil goes into the wood and stays. It becomes part of the wood without coloring it a lot. So that's the beauty of that.
Yeah.
So what do you tell a customer of a bowl how to maintain that?
I wouldn't particularly say use Mahoney's walnut oil, even though it would be nice to do. Any penetrating oil, mineral oil,
vegetable oil
would be fine. But all the items that I make get sent out with a little 4-ounce bottle of my oil with a way of people knowing how to find that again if they want to use that particular oil to rejuvenate their butcher blocks or their plates or their utensils and things.
Yeah, I've been doing that for years, Mike. I buy a gallon of your stuff and I put it in a little 1-ounce. Anytime I sell a bowl, I'll put a little 1-ounce jar of oil in it, and then they've got and a piece of 400 sandpaper and some instructions on how to sand it down and clean it back up and put some oil on it. Works great. They love it.
God bless you.
Hey, Terry Leafers, did you have a question? Terry, I see your hands up.
Yeah, wondered why you didn't use a camera attached to your gouge tool and a monitor to do your hollow forms. You just learned you didn't have to use that from experience then?
Yeah. I at the time of that video was made was a time when there were that technology didn't exist. And,
right.
The same reason I don't use a grinding jig is because those weren't around when I learned how to sharpen. So I don't have all those little fancy items to use. But yeah, that wouldn't be a bad idea. But yeah, no, I could hollow a hollow form just by sound alone without even really seeing it. It's just the acoustics of it. I've done so many of them now, but it wouldn't be necessary.
Hey, Mike, your polymerizing oil that you said, can you give those ratios again?
Yeah, it would be 1/3 polyurethane. So buy any polyurethane that is gloss. You don't ever want to use a non-gloss polyurethane. Well, you may, but I wouldn't. So gloss polyurethane, make sure it's oil-based, and then 1/3 boiled linseed oil, and then 1/3 odorless mineral spirits would be good, or spirits, and that would make a nice penetrating polymerizing oil. And you can work with those ratios. For instance, when you buy water locks as a varnish, or I think they're calling that a varnish, it's a ratio of those three items I just told you about. But they're saying you're using tung oil and not linseed oil, and that's fine. For some reason, tung oil has a better reputation as a natural oil than linseed oil, and I know why. Tung oil is a little more expensive and more exotic, but really side by side, I can't tell the difference, except tung oil is a better moisture barrier, but I can't for the life of me think of why wood needs to have a moisture barrier, at least for a utility item. But when you buy water locks or Form Bs or Minwax, polymerizing oils, they're just a ratio of what I've just said. 1/3 polyurethane, 1/3 odorless mineral spirits, and 1/3 a natural oil like flax or tung or something like that. And actually, water locks is probably 80% odorless mineral spirits and 10% polyurethane and 10% tung oil. So those ratios change with the product, and it even gets thinner and you'll know by the cost of how much polyurethane and tung oil are in it, just by the cost typically. The lower the cost, the thinner the hardeners are in the particular finish.
Thank you.
Yep.
I missed why the polymerizing oil is used.
Well, I'm going to get out of the sun here. Polymerizing oil I use that as a base for my hollow forms. And because it highlights the grain, it deepens the grain. And then I've sprayed over that surface with a lacquer to give that a marketable look. The gloss from the lacquer is what attracts the person to the item. And that's when we talk about finishes, in my mind, there are two types of finishes. There's penetrating oils and there's films. And now you think about the penetrating oils would be mineral oil, the natural oils, linseed oil, tung oil. Those are penetrating. And then Danish oil would be in that. And then the films on that side would be anything, waxes a film, paints a film, lacquers a film, French polish, shellac, all those things are films. And we weigh the two of those types of finishes on our objects. If you wanted to sell your work, you're much better off putting a film on your finish, because the film is the hood ornament. It's what attracts people to the people here in this room. There's 59 of us. We're probably pretty astute wood lovers. We don't really have to be dressed up with a shine. We can appreciate wood without it. But if you want to sell your work, we put a marketable finish on our work, and that means a shine. But there's drawbacks to that. So, for instance, if you put a film finish on a ballpoint pen, I noticed somebody made a pen today, and there's actually a finish made by Mylands, I believe, and it's called French polish for pens. Well, in my mind, it's a horrible finish for a pen, because French polishes are typically shellac based, and shellac is just going to come off in your hands when you use your pen. A better marketable finish for a pen, I would think, is super glue or acrylic. That's a very durable film, and it's not going to come off in your hands. We can talk about finishes all day long, and there's a lot of incredible thoughts that need to go into our work. And the finish, if you put the wrong finish on your work, you're going to get your work closer to the trash bin. So it's a very important aspect of our craft, and hopefully we're doing it right. What is right is up to you. But there's a little bit more on that, on that subject that we could talk about for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, finishes is a heavy subject.
It is.
Every time we got under that, you can go for hours.
Yep. And it's also, much of it is subjective, but there are true hard, fast rules in finishing. I'll suggest Bob Flexner's book on finishing. Bob Flexner, that is the ultimate book on finishing, and it's always worth a read. It's good to have in the shop if you want to make your own finishes and also understand what's appropriate finishes for your particular work.
Look that up.
Look it up. Bob Flexner. He's a little rough around the edges. He's very he's more absolute than I would be as a finish. He has definitely rights and wrongs there that I think could be grayed up a little bit more, but that's okay. I understand that. My college professor was an absolutist too. He had certain rules that had to be done particular ways. Matter of fact, he told me that film finishes should never be applied over penetrating oils because they wouldn't stick. So I believe that, but it wasn't true in real life when I did it for myself. Yeah. Well, everybody, Guy, I kept this kind of late. I'm surprised we still have as many people here.
We have some giveaways that we're going to do yet.
Okay. Well,
I got like three giveaways to do here, and that's what they're hanging on for, I think. But probably you too, because you've done such an incredible job.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, do you want me to stop now? I probably should.
We can end our demonstration portion. Yeah, thanks a lot. Wonderful job.
Thanks, everybody. Hopefully we'll get together in person here soon. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, we're hoping to get there too. So thank
you very much, Mike. Really enjoyed it.
Good.